He never took a marketing class. He never read a business textbook. Every single thing he learned about building a brand, he learned by watching strangers shop for groceries. Today, his brand is in every major retailer across Canada. The classroom was a grocery store. The teacher was every customer who walked through those doors. Meet Connor Walsh, born and raised in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. His father, Dennis Walsh, worked as a plumber. His mother, Irene Walsh, ran the household and raised Connor and his younger sister, Mia, on a careful budget. Connor was quiet, observant, and curious in a way that made teachers uncomfortable. He asked too many why questions. At 15, he got his first job at a neighborhood grocery store called Fielding's Market. No special reason, just needed the money. What happened inside that store over the next 4 years would become the most valuable education of his life. What can a 15-year-old possibly learn from stacking shelves and ringing groceries? That business school never teaches. Connor's first job at Fielding's was simple: stock shelves, sweep aisles, help customers find items. But Connor couldn't turn his brain off. Within 2 weeks he noticed something. Customers who came in for one item almost always left with 3 or 4. He started writing down what those extra items were. Patterns emerged fast. Certain products lived next to the wrong neighbors on shelves. Certain deals were placed where nobody looked. He filled his first notebook in 6 weeks just from watching people shop after school. A teenager keeping customer behavior notebooks in a grocery store. His manager thought it was strange. One day, he asked Connor to explain what he was doing. Connor's store manager, Phil Garrett, a 44-year-old retail veteran, caught Connor writing in his notebook during a slow shift. Instead of scolding him, Phil asked what he was tracking. Connor showed him 3 weeks of behavioral observations: which shelf heights got the most eye contact, which promotions customers ignored, which product pairings drove unplanned purchases. Phil stared at the notebook for a long time. Then he said, "Kid, I've managed stores for 20 years, and nobody has ever handed me anything like this." Phil gave Connor his first real responsibility, rearranging one full aisle using Connor's observations. That one aisle rearrangement produced a 14% sales increase in 30 days, and nobody could explain it except a 15-year-old with a notebook. Most retail workers see products. Connor saw people. He watched how a tired mother moved through the store differently than a retired man on a Tuesday morning. He noticed that customers who read labels bought differently than customers who grabbed without looking. He observed that people always slowed down near the end of an aisle, right before turning, and that space was almost always wasted. He wasn't studying products, he was studying human behavior. And human behavior, he was slowly realizing, was the real engine behind every purchase decision ever made. Connor was 16 years old, and he had already discovered something that most marketing professionals spend careers trying to understand. By 17, Connor had filled 7 notebooks with customer observations, behavioral patterns, and product placement theories. His bedroom desk looked like a researcher's workspace, notebooks stacked, pages flagged, patterns cross-referenced. His dad, Dennis, would walk past the room, peek in, and shake his head. "You're working at a grocery store, son, not NASA." Connor would just smile and keep writing. His mother, Irene, secretly read one of the notebooks while Connor was at school. She didn't understand all of it, but she understood enough to know her son was thinking about something real. She never mentioned it, but she started saving an extra $50 a month just in case Connor ever needed a start. 7 notebooks, 4 years, thousands of customer observations. And then one product on a shelf gave Connor the idea that changed everything. At 17, Connor noticed a locally made hot sauce sitting on the bottom shelf at Fielding's. Wrong placement, terrible label, 0 customer attention, despite having excellent reviews on the few bottles that did sell. He tracked it for 3 weeks, barely moved. He approached the owner of the product, a home cook named Barbara Noel, through a note he left at the store's supplier contact board. Barbara called him. He told her everything he'd observed. She listened. Then she said, "What would you do differently?" Connor stayed up all night writing a product repositioning plan, packaging notes, shelf placement strategy, price point analysis. He emailed it to Barbara at 2 a.m. Barbara Noel read that email in the morning and called Connor before he even woke up for school. Barbara gave Connor permission to implement his suggestions: new label design direction, repositioned shelf placement at eye level, a simple, handwritten tasting card attached to the bottleneck. Connor spent $40 of his own money on the tasting cards. Within 6 weeks, Barbara's hot sauce went from selling 4 bottles a week to 31 bottles a week at Fielding's alone. Barbara sent Connor a check for $200 as a thank you. He almost didn't cash it. It felt too important to spend. That $200 wasn't payment, it was validation. It told him his observations weren't just interesting, they were commercially powerful. 4 bottles a week to 31, using a 40 investment and a notebook full of customer behavior data. Connor just ran his first real marketing campaign without knowing that's what it was called. At 18, graduation arrived. Connor's grades were solid, good enough for a business program at University of Calgary. His parents expected him to go. Phil Garrett at Fielding's offered him an assistant manager role. Connor sat with both options for 2 weeks. Then he did something unexpected. He took the assistant manager role at the store and enrolled in a single night course in brand marketing at a local college. Not a full degree, 1 course. He wanted the specific knowledge, not the credential. His professor, Dr. Credential. Linda Marsh handed out the course syllabus on day 1. Connor read through it and quietly realized he already knew 60% of the content from watching customers shop. When Dr. Linda Marsh realized what her newest student already knew, she stopped teaching him and started learning from him. 3 weeks into the night course, Dr. Marsh assigned a brand-building case study. Connor submitted a 14-page document built entirely on 4 years of real grocery store customer data. No theories, no textbook citations, real human behavior patterns turned into a brand strategy. Dr. Reed. Marsh read it twice. She called Connor after class and said, "This is not a student assignment, this is a consultant's report. Had you ever thought about doing this professionally?" She introduced him to 2 of her former students who had launched consumer product brands. Connor met both of them over coffee in the same week. His world got much bigger very fast. 2 coffee meetings changed Connor's entire direction, and 1 specific conversation planted the seed of his own brand. Through his grocery store years, Connor had noticed one consistent gap. Healthy, affordable snack products with honest, simple branding were almost non-existent in the mid-price range. Premium health brands were too expensive. Budget brands looked cheap and untrustworthy. The middle was wide open. Connor had watched hundreds of customers pick up a health snack, read the label, wince at the price, and put it back. He had written that observation down 17 times across 4 notebooks. At 19, he decided to fill that gap himself. He sketched a brand concept in his notebook. Clean design, honest ingredients list, mid-market price point, no marketing language that talked down to customers. He called it Field and True. Field and True was born in a notebook at a grocery store breakroom table, and the first product was something Connor had watched customers reach for and put back 1,000 times. Connor's first Field and True product was a mixed seed and grain snack bar. No artificial sweeteners, minimal ingredients, sturdy packaging. He spent 3 months developing the recipe with a food science student he found through Dr. Marsh's network. He used $1,800 of personal savings, including the $200 Barbara Noel had paid him and his mother Irene's quietly saved $800, to produce the first 400-unit test batch through a small licensed food production kitchen. The packaging was clean, text-forward, and deliberately simple. Every design decision came directly from his notebooks, what customers actually stopped to read versus what they walked past. 400 units sitting in boxes in his parents' garage, and Connor's plan to sell them was unlike anything any startup founder had tried in Calgary. Connor didn't launch online. He didn't do social media ads. He walked into 11 independent grocery stores across Calgary, including Fielding's, and asked for a 6-week shelf trial. He knew exactly how to talk to store managers because he had been one. He knew what they needed to hear: low risk, return policy on unsold units, and a product that genuinely filled a customer gap. 8 out of 11 stores said yes. Connor personally placed every unit. At eye level, with a simple shelf card he designed himself using lessons from his notebook. He knew exactly where customers looked. He put Field & True exactly there. 8 stores, 400 units, 0 advertising budget, and what happened in the first 30 days made Connor call Dr. Marsh in the middle of the night. All 400 units sold within 23 days. 3 store managers called Connor, asking for restock before he even checked his own inventory. 1 store had sold out in 11 days. Connor stood in his parents' garage looking at empty boxes and felt something he had never felt before: the specific, electric feeling of a market telling you yes. He called Dr. Marsh. She laughed and said, "Now the real work starts." He called Phil Garrett at Fieldings. Phil said, "I always knew those notebooks were going somewhere." He called his mom. Irene cried. His dad, Dennis, quietly went to the garage, looked at the empty boxes and said, "All right then. What do you need?" 400 units gone in 23 days, and the reorder demand was already 3 times his production capacity. Connor had 1 week to solve a problem most startups never get to have. To meet reorder demand, Connor needed to move from a small test kitchen to a proper licensed co-manufacturer. He found one in Red Deer, Alberta, a mid-sized food production facility that worked with emerging consumer brands. The minimum order was 5,000 units. Connor didn't have the capital. He went to his father, Dennis, not to ask for money but to ask for advice. Dennis listened to the whole plan of the kitchen table. Then he stood up, went to his truck, came back with a folded bank statement and slid it across the table. It was Dennis's personal savings account. "You've been working toward this since you were 15, Dennis said. "That money's been waiting." A plumber's savings account funded the first real production run of Field & True, and that investment returned tenfold within 8 months. With consistent production in place, Connor expanded Field & True to 3 products within 18 months: the original grain bar, a roasted chickpea snack, and a simple trail mix with no added sugar. Every product came from the same process: Connor's notebooks, customer behavior data, shelf gap analysis. He wasn't guessing what people wanted, he was confirming what he had already watched them reach for and put back 1,000 times. His sister Mia, now 19 and studying graphic design, took over the brand's visual identity full-time. Field & True started looking like a brand that belonged on premium shelves. It was priced for everyone. 3 products, honest branding, mid-market pricing, and a major Canadian retailer was about to come calling in a way Connor never expected. At 22, Connor received an email from a national grocery chain buyer, one of Canada's top 3 retailers, expressing interest in carrying Field & True across their Western Canada locations. The buyer had been sent a sample package by a regional store manager who was already stocking the brand. Connor prepared for that buyer meeting the way he prepared for everything, with data. He walked in with customer behavior research, sell-through rates from his existing retail partners, and a shelf placement recommendation deck built from 4 years of grocery store observation. The buyer looked at the deck and said, "You understand retail better than most brands we work with that have been doing this for a decade." The meeting lasted 90 minutes, and Connor walked out with a purchase order that changed Field & True's entire scale permanently. The national retailer purchase order covered 214 store locations across Western Canada, the largest single order in Field & True's history. Connor was 22 years old. He called his co-manufacturer in Red Deer and doubled their production agreement. He hired his first 2 full-time employees, a logistics coordinator and a sales associate. He moved Field & True's operations out of his parents' garage and into a small commercial office space in Calgary. The brand that started with 400 units in cardboard boxes was now on shelves in over 200 stores. Dennis Walsh walked into one of those stores, found Field & True on the shelf, picked up a bar, read the label, and stood there for a long time before putting it in his basket. his dad buying his product off a national retailer shelf. But Connor's most important brand decision was still ahead of him, and it came from a mistake that almost cost him the retail deal. 6 months into the national retail partnership, one Field & True product, the trail mix, had significantly lower sell-through rates than the other two. The retailer flagged it. Connor went back to basics. He visited 12 of those stores himself, stood near the shelves, and watched customers. Within 2 hours, he identified the problem. The packaging color blended into the neighboring products, and the shelf position had been assigned poorly by store staff. He didn't blame the retailer. He fixed the packaging, created a simple visual merchandising guide for store staff, and requested a shelf reset. Sell-through rates recovered within 60 days. The retailer renewed all 3 products. Connor updated his notebook. He never stopped updating his notebook. A packaging fix from a notebook habit saved a national retail relationship and reminded Connor that the method that built everything was still the most powerful tool he had. By 25, Field & True had expanded to 6 products, was stocked in 3 national retail chains, and had launched a direct-to-consumer online channel that added 30% to total revenue. Connor brought Dr. Linda Marsh onto his advisory board. Phil Garrett from Fielding's Market consulted on retail partnership strategy. Barbara Noel, whose hot sauce had first shown Connor what repositioning could do, became a supplier partner for a limited edition Field & True collaboration product. Every person who had ever believed in Connor had a seat at the table now. The brand had a team of 11 full-time employees. Connor was still the youngest person in every meeting he walked into. 6 products, 3 national chains, 11 employees, and Connor was 25 years old. But the number that defined everything came 1 year later. Today, Connor Walsh is 28 years old. Field & True is stocked in over 1,400 retail locations across Canada. The brand has launched in select U.S. markets through a distribution partnership. Revenue has crossed 8 figures annually. Mia Walsh heads the brand's full creative department. Dennis and Irene Walsh's loan was repaid with interest on the day Connor signed his first national retail deal. Phil Garrett's photo hangs in the Field & True Calgary office. And on Connor's desk, under a simple glass frame, sits a single page from his very first Fielding's Market notebook, customer behavior observations from a 15-year-old who couldn't stop watching people make choices. The brand was built on what those people were silently asking for all along. He never took a marketing degree. He never had a startup mentor with connections. He had a grocery store, a notebook, and the rare ability to truly watch and truly listen to what people actually want. That was enough to build everything.